Picture this. It's a Tuesday morning in 1978. A government astronomer is sitting alone in a quiet office in Washington, D.C., drinking bad coffee, doing what feels like the most boring job in science. He's going through old photographs. Not exciting photographs, blurry, grainy black and white images of a tiny dot at the far edge of our solar system. His job is just to measure where that dot sits in the sky. That's it. No drama. No discovery expected. But then he notices something. Something that almost every scientist before him had looked at and thrown in the trash. Something that, once he understood what he was really seeing, would not only reveal a hidden world, it would eventually knock an entire planet off its throne. And that world he found, it broke itself open from the inside. And the scar it left behind is so enormous, it makes the Grand Canyon look like a scratch on a sidewalk. This is the story of Charon. And trust me, you've never heard it told like this. Welcome to Brain Twist. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now because we find the stories that science textbooks forgot to make interesting. Let's go back to that Tuesday morning. The astronomer's name is James Christie. He works at the U.S. Naval Observatory, and his assignment is painfully straightforward. He needs to refine Pluto's orbital path around the sun. To do that, he needs clean photographs of Pluto. He pulls out a stack of photographic plates. These are essentially giant pieces of glass coated with light, sensitive material, the way photos were taken before everything went digital. And immediately, he has a problem. Several of the plates are marked defective. The image of Pluto isn't a clean dot like it should be. It looks smeared, elongated, like someone bumped the telescope mid-exposure or the atmosphere was having a rough night. Most scientists would set those plates aside and move on, but Christie stops because something feels off to him. He looks at the background stars on those same defective plates, and they're perfect, crystal clear pinpoints of light. If the problem was the telescope shaking or bad atmospheric seeing, everything in the image would be blurry, the stars and Pluto both. But only Pluto looks wrong. That means the smear isn't a mistake, it's real. There's something physically attached to Pluto in those images, something so close it blends into the planet itself. Christie goes digging. He pulls photographs going back to 1965 from the observatory's archives, images that were labeled defective and basically forgotten, and he finds the same bulge again and again. But the bulge doesn't stay in one place, it rotates. It moves around Pluto in a slow, steady circle. He and his colleague Robert Harrington track it carefully and calculate that this bulge completes one full trip around Pluto every 6.4 days. Here's why that number matters. Pluto itself rotates once every 6.4 days. The bulge and Pluto spin at exactly the same speed. There's only one explanation. What looks like a smear on a bad photograph is actually a moon, a massive companion world, locked in a tight gravitational grip with Pluto, always showing the same face to its partner, always orbiting at the exact same rate Pluto spins. Christie had found an entire world hiding inside what everyone else dismissed as a broken photograph. Now here's the part that still gives me chills. When Christie got to name this new moon, he wanted to honor his wife Charlene, whose nickname was Char. He liked the way words in physics often ended with on, like proton, neutron, electron, so he put the two together. Charon, he thought it was just a sweet personal tribute. He had no idea that in ancient Greek mythology, Charon is the name of the silent ferryman of the dead, the dark figure who carries souls across the river into the underworld, a realm ruled by the god Pluto. He accidentally gave a world the most perfect name in the history of space exploration, and nobody even noticed until after it was already official. The moment Charon was confirmed, astronomers started calculating, and what they found flipped everything they thought they knew about Pluto. Using Charon's orbit, scientists could finally figure out how massive Pluto actually is. And the answer was humbling. Pluto is tiny. Not just small planet tiny. We're talking 1/6 the mass of our own moon. Earth's moon is already pretty light compared to Earth, but at least it's 1.2% of Earth's mass. Charon is about 12% of Pluto's mass. Let that land for a second. Charon is so large relative to Pluto that the two of them don't behave like a planet and its moon. They behave like two worlds in a relationship. Here's what I mean. When our moon orbits Earth, the center of their combined gravity, scientists call it the barycenter, sits deep inside Earth. The moon swings around that point in a big arc while Earth barely wobbles. The moon clearly orbits Earth. There's no debate. But with Pluto and Charon, the barycenter doesn't sit inside Pluto. It sits in the empty space between them, about 960 miles above Pluto's surface. Neither one truly orbits the other. They both orbit a point in empty space, like two figure skaters holding hands and spinning around each other. And it gets stranger. Our moon is tidally locked to Earth, which means it always shows us the same face. But Earth still rotates freely. If you stood on the moon, you'd watch Earth spin through a full day and night cycle beneath you. Pluto and Charon don't work that way. Charon always shows the same face to Pluto, and Pluto always shows the same face to Charon. Both worlds are frozen in a permanent stare down. If you stood on the side of Pluto that faces Charon, that moon would just hang there in the sky, enormous, motionless, never rising, never setting, just staring back at you forever. If you stood on the opposite side of Pluto, you'd have no idea Charon even existed. Scientists call this mutual tidal locking, and it is incredibly rare. In our entire solar system, there is no other major pair like this. This discovery lit a fire under the debate about what Pluto even is. If Pluto and Charon share a barycenter in open space, are they really a planet and its moon? Or are they a double world, two equal partners? This question became one of the biggest arguments in modern astronomy. And eventually it contributed directly to the decision in 2006 to reclassify Pluto as a dwarf planet. Charon, the moon found by accident, helped bring down a planet. So how did two worlds this unusual end up together in the first place? For a long time, the leading theory borrowed from how Earth got its moon, the giant impact hypothesis. Something enormous slammed into early Pluto, blasted a cloud of material into orbit, and that debris slowly clumped together into Charon. It's a clean story. It explains why Charon orbits in such a neat, nearly circular path. But there's a problem. Earth and the object that hit it were mostly rock and metal, materials that melt, mix, and reform relatively easily after a catastrophic collision. Pluto and Charon are not that kind of world. They're made of rock, yes, but also enormous amounts of water ice, rigid, brittle, cold. When you smash two icy worlds together at full speed, you don't get a neat Dibber's cloud, you get chaos. So scientists started running better computer simulations, and what they found was surprising. The data points towards something far more gentle, not a catastrophic collision, more like a slow-motion cosmic kiss. In this newer model, a large Kuiper belt object grazed Pluto at relatively low speed, instead of shattering each other. The two bodies briefly merged into a single lumpy spinning object. Imagine a giant cosmic snowman tumbling through space for a few hours, and then tidal forces gently pulled them apart again before they could fully combine. They separated, but they never truly let go. Gravity kept them together forever as the binary system we see today. This matters because it explains something a violent collision can't. Pluto is about 70% rock inside. Charon is only about 55% rock. If they had been thoroughly smashed and mixed together, they should have roughly the same composition. The fact that they're different suggests they formed separately, bumped into each other gently, and held on. And the heat generated by that initial contact, the stretching, the pulling, the friction as they separated, left a massive amount of thermal energy buried deep inside both worlds. That stored heat is the key to everything that happened to Charon next. For 37 years after Christie's discovery, Charon was just a blur. We knew it existed. We knew its basic orbital facts, but we had no idea what it actually looked like. Then on July 14, 2015, NASA's New Horizons spacecraft flew past the Pluto system after a 9-year journey across the solar system. And for the first time in history, we saw Charon's face. What we saw stopped scientists cold. Charon's surface is destroyed. Not by meteorite impacts, by itself. Running across the moon's entire equator is a system of canyons and fault lines so massive they wrap around the whole world like a scar. The largest section of this system, called Serenity Chasma, stretches for over 100 miles and plunges nearly 6 miles deep. The Grand Canyon, one of the most dramatic landscapes on Earth, is about 277 miles long and barely over a mile deep at its deepest point. Serenity Chasma buries that comparison completely. These aren't canyons carved by water or wind. They're pull-apart faults, places where the crust of Charon was literally stretched until it snapped open. Here's what caused it. When Charon formed, it carried enormous heat inside from that early gravitational collision with Pluto. That heat, combined with the slow decay of radioactive elements in its rocky core, was enough to melt the water ice deep in Charon's interior. Charon had a liquid ocean beneath its frozen surface, a real, actual ocean, buried under miles of ice in the darkness at the edge of our solar system. For a while, Charon was an ocean world, but small worlds in the outer solar system can't hold heat forever. Slowly, over millions of years, Charon cooled, and that ocean began to freeze. Now here's where physics turns against Charon in the cruelest possible way. Water is one of the only substances in nature that expands when it freezes. Ice takes up more space than liquid water. So as Charon's internal ocean froze solid, it grew. It pushed outward against the overlying crust with relentless, unstoppable force. The crust had nowhere to go, so it broke. The entire surface of Charon tore open along its equator, and through those cracks, pressurized slush from the freezing ocean, mixed with ammonia that acted as a kind of natural antifreeze, erupted upward like cold, slow-moving lava. Scientists call this cryovolcanism. I see eruptions instead of fiery ones. This cryolava flooded the southern half of Charon, creating what we now call Vulcan Planitia, a vast, smooth plain that's dramatically younger and flatter than the ancient battered terrain of the north. Scattered across this plain are isolated mountains, giant blocks of old northern crust that broke free, floated like icebergs on rivers of icy slush, and got stranded when the plains froze solid around them. Charon tore itself apart, and then it paved half of itself over with the wreckage. New Horizons revealed one more thing about Charon that nobody fully expected. Something strange and dark sits at its north pole. A massive reddish-brown stain covers the top of the moon like a bruise. Scientists informally named it Mortar Macula. Yes, like the Dark Land from Lord of the Rings, and the name fits better than it probably should. The color comes from molecules called tholins. Tholins are complex organic compounds that form when simple molecules like methane get hit by ultraviolet radiation and cosmic rays. They're reddish, sticky, tar-like substances. You find them scattered across the outer solar system, but nothing like the concentration at Charon's pole. So where did the methane come from? One leading idea, it came from Pluto. Pluto has a thin atmosphere made mostly of nitrogen and methane. And that atmosphere is slowly leaking into space because Pluto's gravity isn't strong enough to hold it all. As Charon orbits, it sweeps through this escaping gas and captures some of it. During Charon's polar winter, which lasts over 100 years because of how slowly the Pluto system tilts through its orbit, temperatures at the pole drop to nearly minus 390 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, the captured methane freezes directly onto the surface. It builds up for decades. Then, when sunlight finally returns, that frozen methane gets cooked by radiation and transforms into tholins. Pluto is literally painting its companion moon from thousands of miles away, one world redecorating another across empty space. The competing idea is that the methane came from inside Charon itself. Those cryovolcanic eruptions that reshaped the southern hemisphere would have released gases dissolved in the subsurface ocean, methane included. A temporary atmosphere could have formed, and just like the first theory, that methane would have drifted to the coldest place available, the poles, where it froze, and eventually cooked into the same reddish stain. Either way, Mortar Macula is a record. It is a visible, permanent mark of everything Charon has been through, whether the story is written in Pluto's breath or in Charon's own ancient interior. Standing on Charon's surface and looking up at that red pole, you'd be looking at billions of years of history painted directly onto the ground. Here's what I keep coming back to. A government employee in 1978 almost threw away the most important photograph of his career. The images were labeled defective. The bulge was supposed to be noise. Every other scientist who looked at those same plates before him saw nothing but a technical problem and moved on. Christie looked closer, and because he looked closer, we found a world with a hidden ocean. A world that froze itself from the inside and cracked its own skin open. A world wearing a red stain that might be the breath of another planet, frozen onto its surface over 100 million years of polar night. Charon isn't just Pluto's moon. It's Pluto's equal, its partner, the other half of the strangest double act in the solar system. And it was hiding in a photograph that almost got thrown in the trash. The universe keeps its best secrets in the places we stop looking,
side by
which
side,
is exactly why we should
with a
never
small
stop
dot
looking. That's it for today on Brain Twist. If this episode made you think, share it with one person who would never expect to care about a moon at the edge of the solar system. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it right now. We put out videos every week that dig into the stories behind the science that most channels skip over. Hit that subscribe button, leave a comment telling me what blew your mind most today, and I will see you in the next one.